Now we get to go into my favorite topic of China and their talk again about about some sort of support, some sort of stimulus. You know, the thing that we continue to go back and forth with, they keep talking about it. And the problem is, as we keep highlighting, the law of diminishing returns is real. And because they have consistently been easing, consistently had easy monetary policy, fiscal policy, just dumping money into the market, you know, there has been no tightness. So the ability to actually have this stimulus go and actually meaningfully do something is hindered significantly. All the reason why we don't see stimulus as coming. And if it does come, it's going to fall flat just because you're not going to have, again, that spring-loaded action. We've talked about it countless times. We got another, essentially word salad from President Xi, and we'll talk about that in a minute, on economic stimulus. And it's funny because I'm reading it and I'm like, man, I was like, this seems like the same thing regurgitated. Like I could have written this in 2021 and here it is again. And I thought, and then the market rallied and I'm like, okay, well, maybe I missed something. And I looked at all the people from Trivium to Sino-China to Chinese Beige Book, and they're like, this is garbage. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it wasn't crazy to see something that, or at least come to the same conclusion when I'm looking. And not that it's garbage, it's just that it's not going to work. Like what is going to be achieved through this? So this is just looking at some of the recent data that's come out, and next week we're going to have more because they'll have PMIs and some other good hard data points. The FX net settlement, 89.5 billion, not too much to happen there. The dollar continues to strengthen. They're seeing some of the weakness here. Industrial profits came in at negative 8.3%, better than prior, but again, still negative. Industrial profits year to date, negative 16.8. So you're still seeing, and remember, industrial side is really where they try to make the most money. But I think it's really important, and here is some commentary from Trivium, some of my own, just to give you an idea of kind of what is happening. So, anyone hoping for leaders were the hoping Chinese leaders were planning significant economic stimulus will be sorely disappointed by the readout of Monday's economically focused July Politburo meeting. Every quarter, Xi chairs the meeting to discuss, obviously, the plan, and Monday's meeting promised to strengthen counter-cyclical adjustments. But again, it offered nothing that can show what's happening to the turning point. So the diagnosis of the economy's problem, insufficient domestic demand, again, dual circulation strategy, common prosperity. They've tried, that's the crux of what they've tried to do. So insufficient domestic demand. Yes, we know that. What are you doing about it? Operating difficulties at some firms. Yes, they created that. It's a communist, the CCP, the communist regime. They have put incredible pressure on these companies, and they're leaving because they're like, the labor differential is gone. The value proposition to being only in China is diminished. It's better to be other places at this point. Many hidden risks in the key areas, shocker, a complex and serious external environment. What's to be done? Fiscal policy must be proactive and monetary policy prudent. Fees and taxes must continue to be reduced. They've been reducing taxes on the corporate level for 10 years. So again, what is the benefit? Because, and especially by bringing down taxes again, we've already shown that provincial governments, local governments, high-level governments are struggling with cash flow because their main source of income was real estate. That's gone. Now what is going to back it? That's why LGFVs, local government financing vehicles, are falling flat. Special purpose bonds, SPBs. There's only so much that can be done. So how are they going to finance themselves? The central bank must continue to deploy structural monetary tools. Okay. They promised proactive fiscal and prudent monetary policies following the meeting. Again, nothing. Economic recovery as a process of waves and zigzags. Well, yes. So the Politburo sees the path to recovery through reforms that reduce risk, help firms boost confidence, and unleash domestic demand, not through stimulus. Well, not through stimulus, but yet the market believes stimulus is coming, but they're going to do this without using stimulus. At best, this means that gradual increase in support on the margin, and then some of the clues to address local debt risks through a comprehensive debt resolution plan. Well, but yet they're trying to push local regions to increase more special purpose bonds, more LGFVs to try to finance local infrastructure spending. And now they want to build dual benefit hotels that can be both essentially, what's it called? Quarantine locations as well as hotels. It's like, okay. Putting job stability at the strategic level, real estate policy to be adjusted promptly, replacing the previous not for speculation rhetoric. So you're going to make it for speculation now? Because remember, they used to say that homes are for living, but yet everybody broadly speculated in it, creating this, especially real estate, the actual consumer, and now you're going to make it more speculative. Coming full circle to this. So on Monday, the PBOC released a draft security management measure for the financial sector. Regulations will impact industries including banking, payments, and fintech. So the PBOC's rules require that sensitive data be classified in two different ways. First, by the nationwide standard 3-tiered system defined by CAC General, Important, and Core. Second, by a 5-tiered risk system of the PBOC's own making. Regular readers might recognize, regular readers, in terms of what they, trivium, in March, PBOC officials complained that the financial sector's data security regulations were in conflict with regulations put in place by the CAC, messing up cross-border data flow. So this doesn't sound like it's making it less complicated. So Beijing wants local governments to stop cooking the books. Shocker. The National Bureau of Statistics announced that special inspection squads are headed to 6 provinces to crack down on statistical fraud. If you don't laugh, you would just sit there and cry because you're like, really? Okay, I can think of other places that exist as they try to crack down and, again, pull things more onto the balance sheet. So that's where we continue to see a significant pressure point to points that we've talked about. Now, one of the things that we also want to look at when we discuss some of the things that are happening on the Japan side before we get back into China. So Japan's inflation is picking up and it's closing its gap with other large economies, and why we think that Japan is going to have to pivot their BOJ strategy. Now, the reason why we talk about Japan in kind of lockstep with China is because there's a concern that China is becoming a Japanification side, and you're going to see a decade of no growth, negative growth, stagnation, and it looks like that's what's coming. And that's why when you look at, did it work for Japan? Yeah, sure, it worked from 1998 to now. It didn't add any real value to the economy, but it's something that actually come to pass. So consumption was supposed to drive China's economy this year. So what's the Politburo going to do? Because remember, when you look at Japan had no growth, no wage growth, no real economic growth from the time they started this crazy amount of stimulus. And it just went sideways. So if, is the PBOC just going to start buying the FXI? Are they going to start buying things similar? Or are they going to let things kind of play out a bit differently? So the Monday's message, again, kind of coming full circle to consumption, because this is the structure that they're looking to do. I guess you could say in trying to get away from the Japanese structure, which went very much heavy on manufacturing, which they've already done, is consumption rebounded following the end of China's zero COVID policy last year, but continues to significantly lag pre-pandemic growth rates. Officials are happy with the recovery of spending on tourism and catering, but worry about those big ticket items like cars, appliances, and home improvements. In the readout from the Monday meeting from the Politburo, they stressed the important role consumption plays in driving growth, combine expanding domestic demand with deepening supply-side structural reforms. A lot of mouth words, but again, they've been saying that since 2019. Boost the consumption of automobiles, electronic products, and home furnishing, and promote the consumption of services such as sports, leisure, and cultural tourism, which is what a lot of the other companies did, and that got them into a lot of problems. They also said expand consumption by increasing residents' income. The Common Prosperity was launched to do that. Again, nothing new is being said. They already have policies that have been crafted to attack this, but we're not seeing anything actually coming to it. Strengthen the production of people's livelihoods, okay. Elevating stable employment to a strategic consideration. All right, well, You're already seeing companies leave, FDI falling, unemployment at the 16 to 24-year-old at the highest level it's ever been. But how is that going to happen and expand the middle class? Even though, as we talked about in segment 1, the most millionaires are leaving China than ever before because of all of these other pressure points. So that's why, like, when you start looking at these pieces, so the Chinese economy really needs is demand side support, but China's leaders are wired to prioritize supply side solutions. They're not ready to change their ways yet because it's a communist country. They keep issuing the same stimulus talk, but again, it's going after the wrong side of the business. And that's where we continue to see why these are going to fall flat, especially when we start looking at some of the underlying pieces. And the piece being looking at the leverage ratios for the local Chinese consumers. So China household debt to disposable income from 2014 to 2023 has taken out the highs that the U.S. was at on household debt to disposable income heading into 2008. So you're looking at something that is exponentially worse and still, not really falling, but just going flat. Home destocking prompts project completions, but not new project launches. So you have new projects that may have already been financed, or at least consumers went in on, that are going to get completely wiped out as they try to bring on new projects. But we already know there's too much housing. So who's going to buy into it? Because people are, especially in China, they're already overexposed to these pieces. So where are we going to get this stimulus to fix this? This figure compares China's household leverage to that of the U.S. in the run-up to the GFC, or Great Financial Crisis, and then when you don't expect much more support for the flagging property sector. So the property sector is getting worse, which would help bring down the household debt to disposable income, because most people took debt or took loans or interest into some of these assets. So there's one key takeaway from Monday's economic focus Politburo meeting. I can't pronounce that word for the life of me. Average home prices across 70 cities dropped for the first time in 6 months. Floor space under construction fell 26.8%. But despite the outlook, the cavalry isn't coming to support the sector because the readout said adapt to major changes in the supply-demand relationship in the real estate market. The high-flying days of breakneck property growth are over. Optimizing real estate policy, ensuring policy differentiating based on local conditions, better meeting residents' needs for first home purchases and home improvements, increasing supply of affordable housing, promoting urban renewal, revitalizing idle properties. Despite this omission, housing is for living, not speculation, which appeared in the last 3 mid-year meetings. We see no indication that significant loosening may be on the horizon. The readout clearly prioritizes real estate market stability and rigid demand, namely new home purchases. Reflating the property market flies in the face of bigger goals, but that's the only way to help these people, especially most of the government officials, government entities, as well as consumers, to get out of their losses. And they're essentially saying that they won't see that. So then when you look to the China real estate sector, drives huge amount of economic activity. And China, it's about 20, when you look at it in general, it's about 21% when you include not only real estate, but also the construction related to real estate. So the contraction side is going to be painful, as China property sector likely at multi-year growth drag, and it's going to continue to drag on the economy, and you're going to have to try to make up now about 21, and obviously it doesn't go to zero, but let's just say that they bring it down to, let's call it 12%. No reason why I picked that number, just random. So you're going to have to make up about 10% of GDP growth that's going to disappear. And again, why we see a lot of these pressure points on GDP in general. Regulators are weighing scrapping rules that disqualify people who've ever had a mortgage, even if fully repaid, from being considered a first-time home buyer in major cities. Currently, home buyers with a mortgage record who don't own a property are still subject to the higher down payment and more restrictive borrowing limits. Some state banks have submitted relevant mortgage data and feedback over the past month. So again, trying to do what they can, but it still falls flat. Private developers' debt has fallen, but non-debt leverage remains high. So again, debt to equity for private sector firms, SOEs, but non-debt liabilities to equity ratio continue to move higher. Private developers' debt has fallen, but non-debt leverage remains exceedingly high across the board. The real estate sector underwent forced deleveraging in recent years. This is mainly because of tighter financial regulations, although private developers have accumulated non-debt liabilities from pre-sales. So that's why we've talked significantly about the different problems that have continued to befall the region. All the while, sales manager index for services is now negative. Sales growth has flatlined. Prices charged have fairly flat. Staffing levels have actually fallen again, which flies in the face of trying to stabilize or ways to try to stabilize the employment market. Profit margins are negative. Market growth steeply negative and falling. Business confidence also turning down as the manufacturing side moves further into negative territory, with sales growth now negative once again after staying positive. Business confidence rolling. Market index negative. Staff levels negative. Profit margins negative. Again, like they're not, when you look at manufacturing, they're not getting a benefit from manufacturing, and services continues to wane. So when you look at retail goods sales growth in China, online and offline, interesting, the pre-pandemic offline sales growth was far lower than online, and yet now they're moving in tandem. What's even more clear is that goods growth hasn't picked up the way they were anticipating. Revenge spending is not playing out, at least in this. And again, I don't want to repeat myself, so I'll just say that this is exactly kind of what we've been seeing. Now, when we pivot to other nations, South Korea, GDP slightly better than expected. Imports coming down though. So when you look forward in terms of what is happening on the South Korean front, South Korean exports are down and falling. And when you look at imports, remember, imports lead exports. So that means that imports are coming down faster than exports. It's pointing to weaker internal demand as well as weaker export demand. Then when you look at Japan's manufacturing PMI is negative, came in at 49.4. Services staying fairly flat, but starting to roll a bit at 53.9. So again, you're starting to see some of that softness, but it's going to take time. It's coming based on what we're seeing in the market, especially on the Asian nation side. Taiwan industrial production flatlining now below 2020, as well as obviously being well below 21 and 22. That's going to continue to get worse, especially. And then you look at non-residents, net investment in Japanese bonds falling further, which means that Japan has been buying, the BOJ has been buying them, and there's some talk that they will stop because they can no longer support policy, which again is a bigger risk to underlying demand. And just putting that into perspective, when you look at CPI expected at 3.2%, came in at 3.3. Ex fresh food energy expected at 4.2, came in at 4.2. But again, all of that is showing that inflation is accelerating, and it's going to put pressure on what is happening there as machine orders are firmly negative. The composite PMI came in at 52.1. But then when you look at leading indexes and a lot of these other pieces, especially on the export-import side, they're rolling over similar and in line to some of the other places in regards to exports and trading. And then when you look at India continues to be an expansion, but on the sales manager index, you can see it's starting to roll over a bit. But we do believe India is going to continue to be a bright spot similar to Vietnam. So just to kind of round it out, again, I know we've gotten pushback on our views on China of like, oh, they're going to fix this. It's a communist nation. Don't worry about it. Again, we're worried about it because we don't see it playing out that way. And we continue to try to show data points that support that, as well as data points that don't. And unfortunately, there's more and more things that are showing that we're more right than wrong, and why we think there's additional downside on China, and why, again, their belief that they're going to buy all of this crude is just misplaced. So that's what we have for you today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks again for watching. I'm Mark Rossano, founder and CEO of C6 Capital Holdings, coming to you from Primary Vision Network.